5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Oh my God.
It was at this very moment that Elon Musk witnessed an event over 10 years in the making. SpaceX not only launched one of the most powerful rockets ever created, but was able to recover 2 of the main boosters, something deemed impossible, and would usher in a future for reusable rockets. So how did SpaceX go from a small startup company with lofty dreams to reach the red planet to a company that would change space travel forever? Before rockets were blasting off and subsequently landing back on land or drone ships at sea, we have to go back to 2001, when Elon Musk first conceptualized a trip to Mars and what set him on the path to creating SpaceX itself. Musk never really set out to start his own space company, but instead he had a very simple plan. Land a miniature greenhouse on Mars and grow a few plants while you're at it. The project was called Mars Oasis, and the tagline for the entire thing was "the furthest that life has ever traveled." This was his attempt to regain public attention in space exploration, and of course increase NASA's annual operating budget while he was at it. The original plan for this was to buy a few cheap rockets from Russia and use those to make some trips to Mars. But, of course, thanks to some red tape and lack of cheaper rockets, well, that plan quickly fell short. It was only on a flight home from Russia that Musk realized that he could start his very own company to design and build the rockets themselves. Applying that vertical integration and modern software engineering that he had learned while he founded PayPal, he felt that SpaceX could make space launches far more affordable. So in 2002, Musk started searching for his first round of employees for his brand new space company. Musk even personally interviewing each one for their future positions. After just a few years, SpaceX had its very first rocket called the Falcon 1, aptly named by Musk after the Millennium Falcon from the Star Wars films. The Falcon 1 was a 2-stage-to-orbit small lift rocket designed to bring cargo into space. Though in the very same year as showing off the Falcon 1, SpaceX announced plans to pursue human commercial spaceflight by the end of the decade. Falcon 1, though, wasn't an immediate success. The first 3 launches actually were complete failures, as the rocket failed to reach orbit. SpaceX was in some trouble financially at this time, as Musk had only planned to fund the first 3 launches of the Falcon 1. The 4th launch was the biggest gamble they ever had. If it didn't work, well, the company would be bankrupt, and thus it would end Elon's dream of going to Mars. But as luck would have it, the 4th Falcon 1 launch was a success on September 20th of 2008. This proved to NASA that SpaceX could be capable of supplying cargo to the International Space Station in the near future. And thus, NASA agreed to award SpaceX the first commercial resupply service contract in December of 2008, financially saving SpaceX from bankruptcy at the time. Following the successful funding from NASA, SpaceX began to develop their next generation of rocket called the Falcon 9. SpaceX did originally plan for a medium-type version of rocket for the Falcon family called the Falcon 5, but that idea quickly was scrapped for the larger capacity Falcon 9. The Falcon 9 first blasted off in June 2010 with the very first Dragon spacecraft qualification unit on top. This was designed to test a number of systems before the first Dragon capsule would be launched in December of that same year. And by the end of 2010, SpaceX was ramping up to produce a single Dragon capsule every 3 months in preparation for future flights to the International Space Station. It was also during this time that SpaceX began to work on a brand new test platform called the Grasshopper. The Grasshopper prototype was designed to test out the next big breakthrough for SpaceX, that being vertical landing. Grasshopper made a total of 8 test flights between 2012 and 2013, culminating culminating with its 8th flight on October 7th, 2013, flying to an altitude of 744 meters before making a vertical landing. All of the information gathered during these test flights would help SpaceX become the only organization in the world to regularly land their rockets for reuse. Flash forward to 2013, and we would see the launch of the first commercial mission for a private customer as the company ramped up to take on more and more cargo into space. But it wasn't all positive at this time. As SpaceX was ramping up for its first commercial space missions, some from NASA's historic past were speaking out against SpaceX's plans to commercialize space. NASA legends like Apollo astronaut Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan testified to Congress against commercial spaceflight and the way in which SpaceX was quickly working to develop it. When asked during a TV interview, Elon appeared rather emotional about this topic.
I was very sad to see that because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
So they're hoping they would.
This wouldn't put a damper, though, on the speed at which SpaceX was moving. Soon after, in 2015, SpaceX secured another large round of funding from Google and Fidelity for $1 billion in exchange for about 8.33% of the company. It was at this time that SpaceX had been valued at $12 billion. In the same month as receiving all of this new funding, SpaceX announced plans to develop a brand new satellite internet constellation called Starlink, and this would deliver high-speed internet anywhere on the planet. Starlink would be made up of over 4,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. Launching in groups of about 60 satellites at a time, they'd be launched by the Falcon 9 rocket. This allowed SpaceX to build and launch their very own satellites without the need of a third party. Profits made from the Starlink service would then be used to fund SpaceX into the future. And by 2021, Starlink would grow to have nearly 500,000 customers around the world. With each customer paying around $99 a month for the service, it's estimated that Starlink currently generates nearly $600 million each year for the company. And that number is only expected to go up. Though many people may not know much about SpaceX, the one video clip that many people have seen is the landing of their rockets, something that no other space company has been able to do before. In December of 2015, SpaceX successfully landed the Falcon 9 rocket. This was a huge step for SpaceX, and of course the original vision by Elon Musk to make space launches more affordable and more accessible to all. And only after 4 successful landings of the Falcon 9 rocket, SpaceX started offering customers the option to launch their payloads on a reused Falcon 9 booster for a 10% discount on their launch costs. All of these amazing feats were not without their mistakes. In 2016, a Falcon 9 exploded on the launch pad during a propellant filling operation for the pre-launch static test fire of its engines. The payload of a $200 million Amos communications satellite was destroyed in the explosion. By 2017, SpaceX had turned into a global leader when it came to launch providers, with about 45% of all commercial launch contracts going through the company. By 2018, SpaceX had over 100 launches in its manifest, representing a staggering $12 billion in contract revenue made during those launches. And in 2018, SpaceX would take on its next giant task, the launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket. The design of this rocket was pretty simple in concept: 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together. The side 2 rockets would be disconnected after some time, with the middle section taking the payload into orbit. With a total of 27 rocket engines and a lifting capability of 63,800 kilograms to low Earth orbit, this rocket was nothing to scoff at. And on February 6th, 2018, SpaceX would launch their very very first test of the Falcon Heavy rocket, sending Elon Musk's very own Tesla Roadster into orbit and off to Mars. Honestly, this was a pretty cool thing to witness. The launch went off without a hitch, and soon after, the rocket made it to orbit. The fairings blew off to reveal something never seen before. A car with the SpaceX mascot orbiting high above the Earth, being live streamed back to millions watching around the globe. Though it was only a test flight, SpaceX never ceases to entertain and amaze those watching. And hey, sending up a car is far more interesting than a giant block of concrete, like all the other companies were doing when they were testing their rockets. And for those wondering, at the time of recording this video, Starman and Elon Musk's Tesla have traveled over 309 million kilometers from Earth, orbiting the sun at a speed of around 72,000 kilometers an hour. It would be only 2 years later that SpaceX would make another big mark in the history books with the launch of 2 humans into space. Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken would be the first astronauts to fly in a commercial spacecraft up to the International Space Station. This is all part of NASA's new commercial flight program. This would also be the first crewed launch from American soil in 9 years after the space shuttles were retired from service.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
The mission took off from the historic Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex 39A without a hitch, and soon after, the astronauts were in orbit and beginning their trek to dock with the International Space Station. Following the success of the Falcon 9 platform, it was time to think big, and SpaceX did just that. In 2019, construction would begin on a whole new spacecraft to be called Starship. Consisting of a main booster section to be called the Super Heavy and the main spacecraft also to be called the Starship, the new rocket would be one of the largest ones ever created, dwarfing the Saturn V, which was a truly massive rocket. The Starship would also be fully reusable, with the Super Heavy booster and Starship capable of vertical landing back on Earth or other planets. Designed from the beginning to bring people to Mars and beyond, Starship would be the future vehicle of choice for SpaceX. Starship has gone through a number of iterations since its original announcement, but SpaceX continues to forge forward, creating more and more test vehicles at their brand new starbase outside of Boca Chica, Texas, the new home for all things SpaceX. And at the speed at which SpaceX continues to develop this brand new platform, I have little doubt that they will be the first private company in the world to land on the moon, and of course possibly Mars, in the next few decades. It really is amazing to see the quick rise of a company like SpaceX and the true impact that they've had so far on space and the way that the public sees space travel right now. Ever since the ending of the Apollo programs, the public interest in space has been dwindling. It's really only in the last 5 to 10 years, and thanks to companies like SpaceX, that the public and the world has become more and more interested in space travel again. And who knows, maybe soon we could all have the chance to visit the moon or Mars, just like we all imagined back at the times of the first space race. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit up that like button and of course subscribe and click the bell button so that you can be alerted to all of my future uploads. Until next time, I'm Curtis Paradis. Thanks for watching.